Well, Rick, thank you so much for joining today. I'm really excited to have this opportunity to have a conversation. And I was just curious, just to kind of get started. This happened because we asked you some questions about emotional intelligence in the marketplace. Like, what, for you as a leader, what does emotional intelligence mean to you?
I mean, I think it means understanding people, and just in general, whether that both kind of up, down, and sideways. So, trying to understand the needs of the people above you that you report into, or have big stakes in the company, as well as your immediate peers that run other parts of the company, and then of course under the people underneath you, and then trying to take the time to develop them, and trying to be introspective and learning from you know constantly learning what you're doing, because I think it's never something that anybody can really say that they're necessarily great at. Every person's different. You're always going to have to evolve and iterate your thinking.
It's interesting you say that because what I've experienced the most with leaders is that one of the biggest things in emotional intelligence that seems to be the struggle is it really requires setting that ego aside and being able to accept feedback and to like a and to really like being able to tune into someone else, which doesn't necessarily mean that like the ego is a bad thing; it's a great thing. And in order to tune into someone else, it requires us to take a step back and to really kind of read between the lines. So I was curious for you, like, what's a time where you've had to kind of read between the lines where maybe something wasn't like obvious on the surface, but you kind of had some insight that gave you an opportunity for a great example of leadership for yourself, but also for your team members?
I think one example that I can, or that always sticks out to me, I think, just trying to be more self-aware is my two companies back, when I was at One Stop. We had, it was kind of a combination of agency and, but then we also ran the entire business for the brands that we worked with. And
Mm-hmm.
so we had one brand that was on the fence. They were considering leaving, as well as potentially continuing to keep part of their services with us. And so I had one person who was really kind of the lead with that, and I was really waiting for him to kind of move it along, and he kind of wasn't really able to get any traction. So I stepped in and tried to pitch the client to stay. And I think feedback he gave me much later was probably, I don't know, 3 6 months after it happened, was that to the client I came across as very arrogant,
Uh,
which I think I was pitching marketing services, and I've pitched those for a long time, and I always position myself as I'm the expert. I know your business as well as you, and things like that. So that was normal for me, or normally how I did it. But to him, feedback that she had given him afterwards and that he took is that I came off as kind of arrogant through the process. And so he kind of aired all this at the end of a leadership meeting. So the rest of the leadership team was all there, and and he reported into me. So I could have handled it a few different ways, I guess. But what I chose to do was take a step back, listen to him, what he was saying, give some of my reasoning for why I handled the meeting the way that I did, but try to listen to him and hear, because his was probably, some feedback from her, but probably also his own just frustration with the overall thing. So, I sat there in front of everybody and took the feedback, and, tried to make it non-adversarial,
mm-hmm.
and, and create more of a, give him some feedback too, but not try to not do it in a threatening or his boss, kind of way. So
Yeah.
it was totally uncomfortable. It was really hard, and and I had to fight a lot of my natural instincts there. But I think like I got praise from the CEO afterwards,
Yeah.
in my next one-on-one with him, that he was really impressed with me and the way that I handled that, and the way that I was willing to listen and take feedback, and not not just dismiss it.
Yeah, I love that. And you know what I appreciate most about that is that you saw immediately that this issue that was being brought up wasn't just what he was saying. There was something brewing under the surface that you were able to see that there might be something going on with him as well. Um, so I think that's really great, and I see that a lot too, where it's like, you know, people will say like it's a projection, right? It's like I can, because I have someone else either on my side or that I can say said something. It gives this opportunity to say some of the things that I've been feeling as well. And then obviously as leaders, we hope that that feedback comes in a short amount of time so that we can apply it. Yeah, excellent. So I have a very interesting kind of market driven question. I found myself in an interesting position this last week because I just moved, so I'm like shopping more than I typically would be shopping, and I'm going into a bunch of different places. And I was in the mall, and I found that it was jarring to me being in the mall, and it was empty inside the mall. And Macy's had inventories that were just overflowing more than, and Macy's always has heavy inventory, but like I saw, like you could barely walk through Macy's. And then literally the next day, I go into Walmart and the shelves are empty and toothbrushes are being locked up. And so my question for you, of, you know, myself being in the market, you know, for quite some time and going through changing economic conditions and seeing where we're protecting things, I'm accustomed to things like high ticket items being protected. I was very shocked to see something that I would consider a basic need being protected. And just looking at kind of society and where the emotional state of society is right now, do you have any insights into kind of market conditions and what's keeping you up at night, I suppose?
I don't know. I mean, I work on the digital commerce side, so I guess
Yeah.
keeping me up at night is the site actually working, and are people able to transact that actually want to transact? That's
Yeah.
really probably the bigger thing. I think, you know, organizations as a whole, it's just kind of general out there in the landscape. But certainly, if you have an offline presence and an online presence, it is a very difficult time because, you know, just most companies aren't pivoting quick enough to try to figure that out.
Yeah.
It's more the ones probably that are excelling today are the ones that are starting out as direct to consumer digitally. And then as they continue to scale and gain traction, then they move offline and they'll open a store and things like that. But yeah, it's difficult because you do have all the inventories all over the place, and it's hard to manage the inventory. So
Yeah.
I don't know what would cause some things to be locked up and other things to be not locked up. I guess maybe the only thing I could really think would be as the offline stores become more of a try on type of, you know, more of a sampling type of, you know, facility. So like a Macy's, you know, really has to deal with that where, you know, where people are going to sample the clothes or, you know, products or anything that they're looking at, and then they're going to go online and they're going to buy it. And typically they probably will buy more. They may buy more online than they would buy in store. And so they have to try to facilitate all of those things.
Yeah.
And so the more they lock stuff up, the more difficult that's going to be, and probably the more it's going to turn customers off.
Yeah, I just found it interesting just kind of in looking at consumer attitudes, right? Just towards spending. That's where I really found it interesting. It's, you know, because if we're not spending in Macy's and we're not going to the malls, then that's a sign that luxury spending is declining in some markets. And then if we're locking up toothbrushes, that's telling us that, at least from my perspective, you know, saying that, you know, hey, consumers are, and I specifically asked because I'm a dork, and I walked in and I was like, hello, what is going on? Explain this to me. And they flat out said that people were stealing toothbrushes, you know? So like as leaders, like in the market, in digital marketing, you know, I like to look at these signs to say, okay, well, what does this mean to us from a business perspective, and really like into looking at the emotional sentiment of our audiences. And so I'm curious as to like what's going to happen over the next 6 months to a year. I don't talk politics, I talk emotions, but just the emotional impact of this election in 2020 and people coming into it and feeling obviously emotionally volatile, polarizing emotions happening on both sides. As a leader for you and managing your team, what kind of things are you taking into account and kind of helping people deal with the emotions of what's happening in the world right now?
It's a tough one because, it is one you have to be super, super sensitive about. I mean, I'm in Southern California, so it tends to be probably more liberal.
Yeah.
But so the more, that because that divide is so strong, conservative and progressive right now.
Yeah.
There isn't, you're very much, you can be a very polarized minority really quick either way, depending on the organization you're in. So being in Southern California tends to be more, generally more progressive. You're not gonna, but any of those people that are big Trump fans right now, they're very much the minority if you're in, in a place like Southern California, or probably
Right.
really the majority of California as a whole.
Yeah.
You're going to be in that. And I've seen the opposite of, you walk into some of those conversations in some places and you realize, okay, a more progressive viewpoint isn't going to be received very well here at all.
Yeah, I've seen that. Like I said, like I've seen it just all over the board because I don't take any stance in particular. So like I can see all of the different perspectives, and what I'm noticing just at work is that there's a level of stress and anxiety that's coming from outside that's finding its way inside. And as a result of that, like as I'm trying to like figure out where this is coming from, like where is the problem so we can figure out the solution, like looking for the core of it, it starts to come up down to self-awareness, honestly. And kind of the conversation you were having in terms of being able to look at yourself, understand where your emotions are coming from, and then connect them to either the situation at hand and or recognize that there might be something behind it that's bigger than that.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it you probably, there's a certain amount of it in reality you have to take as it's really kind of tabloid politics that are happening right now, and that's kind of where we currently are. Looking at history with the yellow press and stuff like that, it's not like this hasn't happened before.
Right.
It's happened before, and we're in the middle of it right now. We're still out there. Our primary job is to try to connect with people and tell our brand story, and show our value proposition of why the products that we're trying to move are good for the customer. And you really kind of have to leave it at that. Once you get into the other things, some people can try to play it up and and say make America great again, and try to sell things that way. But then you're really narrowing your audience. You really have to keep it at, I have a product that has a value proposition to you, and you are a customer with a specific need, and how do I connect those two? And that's really what I just always try to think as a marketer and communicate out to my teams that that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, that's really great.
Everything else, is kind of, it's just, it's your personal life. And, that kind of is what it is.
Yeah. It's great. And I think that that's exactly what, we're seeing as well. There's becoming a little bit of a divide, so that we can kind of have space and we can all have our opinions and do our thing. But then when we're coming into work, it's very much about we're here for the task at hand. We're here to connect with our customers. And in connecting with customers, I think that market is changing as well. So as we start looking at digital marketing, it's been a wild ride over the last couple of decades, where we went from no web presence to all web presence for many companies now. What kind of trends do you see coming into market that we should be paying attention to?
The biggest trend happening right now is the walled garden concept.
Mm-hmm.
That's really probably the biggest one, because that very much impacts a lot of things that you were able to do in the past that you won't be able to do as much. And it really makes sense. But really to get out of, there's like 5 or 7 web properties that dominate the traffic and the mind share from consumers that are out there. So you have to be in those places, but they're making it more and more difficult for a person to leave unless they're leaving for, some kind of paid media ad.
Uh-huh.
And so, so you have to really adapt to your strategies and your thinking, because people are going there, they're asking their questions, they're looking for information. So you have to figure out how to be there and answer those questions without being able to get them to your website and to transact that way. So you have that piece going on, which changes your kind of tactical approach. And then, it also really, puts you in a different position that you really have to focus on your brand and how you get people directly to you.
Yeah.
You used to be able to kind of go, okay, I'm going to get a bunch of SEO traffic, or, I'm going to post a bunch of things on Facebook and people will click through and do that. But those things are becoming more difficult. So you have to look at those as branding exercises, and then look outside and say, what other kinds of branding activities can I do? And the customers that I have, how can I incentivize them to continue to, shop and transact with me? So to me, I think you have to be much more customer centric.
Uh-huh.
And, and it's kind of forcing you to be better at your job. You probably could be average and still do well before, and that's getting more and more difficult. And you have to be more a traditional marketer. You can't be a niche marketer, which you could for a long time digitally.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I would say, over the last decade with social coming around, I was one of the people who specialized in social. I went from running marketing teams to like specializing in social, and now I'm back in all digital again because, we figured out how to measure social media. We got it all to work, and now it's part of an integrated mix. So we have some new channels that'll be coming in and offering those opportunities. What are your thoughts in terms of, there's lots of conversation about data privacy and data integrity and, even kind of this like zero data conversation, what do you think about this whole conversation about, how do we honor our customers' consumer data and protect it while also using it in a way that designs better experiences for them?
That was constantly, I don't know. Lately I've been trying to take a step back from that and think more about put myself in the customer's shoes, because I think we as marketers or, website providers or e-com providers or whatever it may be, have kind of like, we've just talked ourselves into the fact that, every customer wants a personalized experience to them. So we have to get as much information as them, and that's what we have to show them. And, and I think more and say, is that really actually what the customer wants? Or does the customer want an experience where they can come and discover and figure out what they want and shop like they would, like, hey, if I walked into a store, do I necessarily want some buzzer going off and a sales associate goes like, okay, Rick just walked in, I know, here's the 10 things he's going to want to look at, and they will run at me? Or do they really, do I really want to walk in the store and go, let me look at a few aisles. I know I want to get to this, but let me see what else is here and kind of go through my own discovery process on my own, versus having it all told to me. So I think that's the thing that I feel like we've tried to tilt a little bit too much the other way, and that's what's coming up a lot with Facebook results and Google results and Instagram and everything else, is we've tried to say, I know exactly what you want, and I'm feeding you all the things that I think you want, and then it becomes what you know. And then that's impacting, like when we talk about the political side, then that's impacting, like, now your emotions get much stronger the other way. And so I feel like there'll be some kind of course correct around that because of the data privacy things, and maybe there'll be some more honest assessment where, people really go out and they survey their customers and say, do you want a personalized experience, or do you just want a better shopping experience where, you have better site search and, and we give you an experience that makes sense to you, not one that we're trying to guess who you are and then feed you just what we think you want. Or in the, in probably the more annoying sense to the consumer is, we just want to feed you the things that we want to sell you, and we can care less who you are. So somewhere there's like some right way to do that I think's evolving. The whole personalization piece like one of those holy grail type things out
Yeah.
there that, that we've been trying to do. And I don't know if it was necessarily the right thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. It is kind of like the holy grail. And interestingly enough, I don't know if you've ever read Doc Searles wrote a book called The Intention Economy. It is a very technical read that I had a very difficult time getting through. But the point of it is essentially this theory that we're moving into an economy where rather than us trying to get in front of the consumer is going to raise their hand and say, hey, I'm looking for auto parts this month for my 65 Chevy. And I'd like you to, and I'm in the market for people who are selling that, and then they accept offers, select, and then move on, and then they don't need ads anymore for the thing that they were searching for. So using more of intention versus search history.
Yeah. I mean, that can be interesting. So I know there's a company called Fair Trade. They sell coffee, and they've created, as part of their experience, like you go and they ask you a bunch of questions about what kind of coffee drinker you are. So then they can recommend the type of beans that you would want based on the type of coffee drinker you are. So I like that concept of people trying to go out and more directly ask people, like, who are you? What are you looking for? And in the past, we've always said, like, oh, that creates friction. We don't want to do that. We're going to lower our conversion rates. We're not going to do that. We don't want to collect that. Like, how can we do this in the most anonymous way possible and gather the most information and then tell you exactly what you want? Maybe that's the wrong approach. Maybe we should be really trying to have conversations with people and say, who are you? I want to know who you are. And I want to, and if you want a personal experience, I want to give it to you. If you don't, that's fine.
Right. And that's honestly, it's so interesting because that's the thing that I see so often is that just from being in marketing, so often we spend a lot of time researching our customers and messaging our customers and seeing what's working and what's not working. And then sometimes we feel like we really know the customer. And at the end of that, we stop short of asking the customer the actual question because we think we understand. So that whole thing of going back and this all happened because we asked some questions of how do you feel about this? What's the topic of today? And then you get this opportunity to start a conversation where you actually get to know somebody. And I think that is the holy grail because companies don't sell things at the end of the day. People do, and people buy from people. And the more that we can kind of get this human to human connection going, I think that's going to be a huge differentiator coming into the market where we have AI kind of taking over, optimizing for ROI. Who knows what's going to happen to ad copy over the next 3 years? I'm really interested to see what's going to happen when machines start writing our ad copy and how it gets optimized to convert. And I think that's the difference of the companies that are going to really do great over these next few years are the ones that are really paying attention to sentiment in the market, aligning to the customer's need, and then just addressing it. Yeah. Awesome.
Well, and what happens when computers start doing it all? On the email side, there's a company called Persado, and they basically have an AI that writes your email subject lines. So what you end up happening if you use them, and then you start seeing the patterns of how they're creating it for you, and then you go back and look at all your emails, you'll be able to pick out all the ones that are likely using that company to write their headlines, because then they all start looking the same.
Right. And right. And that is, I think that's the risk of every marketer when we're using formulas that work, right? We know something works, and so we keep iterating it, and it becomes like all the websites look alike or all the landing pages look alike, So yeah, that's definitely true. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat today. I really appreciate it. Your insight is incredibly valuable and insightful for what's happening in the market, and I appreciate it.